I'm Bailey,
And I'm Jenny.
and this is the Hell is a Teenage Girl podcast.
Episode 3.
This is 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about the 1976 film Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a horror classic. And I just want to
Yeah.
say, dear listeners, me and Jenny, we're going through it. I'm just now getting through a cold, a really bad head cold, and Jenny is struggling
Yeah.
through finals, in the trenches,
Mm-hmm.
pulling through. Yeah.
2 group projects.
Yeah, and not enough help from. Actually, I'm not gonna throw shade on our podcast.
No,
Maybe
let's just say I suffered.
Let's just say that Jenny was carrying a lot of the weight.
I literally was crucified like Jesus.
Yeah, you were literally
during my group projects.
Yeah. So
I died for their
you're
sins.
kind of like a saint a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Okay.
All right.
Carrie.
Yeah, where do you want to start off?
Let's start off with First of all, I just realized we didn't decide how to split the acts.
Okay.
So I think
With Carrie?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I see. It's funny because in my journal, it's my notes are literally split into not into 3 parts, but into 2, and they're literally just divided between with this just giant word prom written in just heavy metal font. So that's all I gotta say about that.
Okay.
Yeah, to me that was the 2 defining.
Honestly,
that was the defining like separation of the movie, was just like before prom and like after prom.
honestly, let's do that
Yeah.
because there's so much content to mine
Yeah.
in the last half of the movie. You know, as it tends to be. But I think especially with Carrie, a lot of the illusions and a lot of the actual like work is being done in the latter half.
Yeah, I think so too.
So let's split it like that.
Yeah.
And I noticed some really, really interesting parallels, and I'm really excited to talk about.
I'm so excited.
Okay, but first, I'm gonna do. Okay, well, the main figures that are involved in making the film, the director, Brian De Palma. Brian De Palma?
Palma? I think it's
Palma?
Yeah.
Okay. Producer, Paul Monish. The screenplay by Lawrence D. Cohen, and the novel by Stephen King.
Stephen King. Yeah. I think it was his first novel too.
Really?
I think so. I mean,
he probably has mommy issues.
That's what. Okay.
Sorry.
Apparently, I think I did read that was his first novel, and I think I read that because I was reading sort of like the behind the scenes things, and it did say that he received like a very like low payment, like it was like a rights payment or something for like the movie to be made.
Yeah.
And it was really, really low, but he was really, really lucky that like I think that his first novel got turned into such like a big movie. So,
yeah, and such a good movie.
It's such a good movie. I think Stephen King movies are notoriously bad.
Yeah.
And so, but I think this is like definitely the one where I forget that is based on a Stephen King novel.
I forget too,
because
actually.
it's so good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think that there are some like outliers that are like really good. I think I like Misery a lot.
Misery is great. Yeah.
But a lot of the times I think that his particular brand of kind of like misogyny and weird like he's got weird stuff going on in his head, and it comes across in his films.
It's a cocaine addiction.
Yeah.
And I think that Carrie, when I was watching the movie again, I think that Carrie is sort of an example of like 2 wrongs making a right, because I do think that there's a certain like level of misogyny in Carrie, but I think that it comes through in such a way that it's sort of like almost like it is sort of like self-aware of its misogyny, and it's sort of like pointing out like a lot of issues like about misogyny. So
yeah, and I do think that the film in particular, I can't speak to the original source material, but I think that the film in particular deals with like people's discomfort, and like I think that that's highlighted a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the actors real quick.
Yeah.
So Sissy Spacek,
Slay.
I love her.
I love her too.
There has never been a more perfect casting of anything ever, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that I haven't watched the newer Carrie with Grace Moretz, but I
I
don't think I
have.
ever will
Yeah.
because that casting is just so not good.
Yeah, I did watch the like new one a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they tweaked it definitely to like be like more like modern day.
Yeah.
But there's just something like, and like I'll talk about it like later on, but like the way that Sissy Spacek does like the perfect like scared eyes. Her eyes are so good in this movie. Like her face is so good, her mannerisms are so good. But we'll get into that.
Her eyes really, really do shine.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah.
yeah, and it's just a really like big range.
Yes.
That
yeah.
she uses them with. But yeah, so Sissy Spacek as Carrie White, Piper Laurie as Margaret White.
Mm-hmm.
Not familiar with this actor, but she does a phenomenal job in this.
I feel like I've seen her in some other older movies, but I can't remember which ones.
Yeah, it's somebody who I know I've seen around, but I can't
Yeah.
put my finger on it.
Yeah.
Amy Irving as Sue.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's pretty strong as well.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel bad for her.
Why do you feel bad for her?
The character, not
the character.
actor.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I feel bad for her too.
Yeah, but she did a great job. William Catt as Tommy Ross.
Yes.
His smile was kind of unnerving.
Unnerving. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some definitely like he definitely pulled through playing that sort of like I don't care kind of boyfriend, but like he's like the popular guy, but he's not like so popular that he's like really mean. He's just popular because people like him, and then his girlfriend like is like a much more caring person, and then so she kind of influences him that way.
Yeah.
He definitely pulled through really well playing that character. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nancy Allen as Chris Hargison.
She did a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Also adorable. Like, just adorable person.
I know, and it's funny, like, watching that movie, like, I feel like, whenever I, like, look at her face, I'm like, I feel like she literally, like, I don't know, she's like the kind of pretty where, like, you're like, yeah, you would be mean, and then Carrie's sort of, like, the pretty where you're like, yeah, you would be a loser. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then John Travolta as...
That was a jump scare. That was a huge jump scare. I'm
You
sorry.
don't remember John Travolta?
I mean, like, sometimes I feel like he just shows up in movies sometimes, and so, like, I never really know when I'm gonna see him. And I did know that he was in the movie.
Yeah.
But I kind of, like, forgot, and it was just, like, the same thing with, like, Chris Pratt and Jennifer's Body, where I kind of forgot about it, and then when he showed up, I was like, oh, fuck, yeah, I forgot about that. You know what I mean? So...
yeah. He does a great job in this.
Yeah.
Like, despicable character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is so surprising because I feel like John Travolta plays like the cool guy. Yeah. But in this he was just like so deplorable.
Just like vile.
Yeah, he almost had
disgusting.
like Gaston vibes like going on where you're just like, ew, like, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Pretty gross, but he did a good job at it. And then PJ Souls as Norma Watson, and the only reason I bring PJ Souls up is because she's also in Halloween.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's so funny that she's in like these two like
big time horror movies, classics. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's just like a little side character in both of them. Yeah. She's just like in there.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely more sympathetic in Halloween than in this film.
And Carrie, yeah. That's true.
Yeah. But she plays being like an annoying bitch really well.
Yeah.
You know?
True.
She does her job.
Yeah.
Okay. Plot synopsis time.
Yes.
Yeah. So Carrie White lives with her religious zealot Catholic core mom. Mm-hmm. She's an outcast and clueless about the simplest things, like the fact that she is supposed to have a period.
Yes.
And she probably should have had it by now.
Mm-hmm.
Her classmates traumatize her while she has a freak out over realizing that her period has begun, because she doesn't know that it's supposed to happen. Chris Hargison especially hates her and refuses to be punished for her shitty actions, while her friend Sue feels genuine remorse over what she's done. Because she feels so guilty about the situation, Sue convinces Tommy to take Carrie to the prom.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Chris convinces Billy to cover Carrie in pig's blood at the prom. Chris's plan is to rig the school's prom queen competition to get Carrie elected, to get her to stand on the mark, to drop the blood on her. So while Carrie is having like a beautiful, diffused 70s dance prom thing, and then she's crowned Chris is getting ready to
Pull the rope.
pull the rope.
Yep.
And she does. And Carrie goes catatonic, and then she kind of has visions of people laughing at her, like her mom said that they would. And then she goes on a massacre and kills everyone in the gym.
Using her telekinesis.
Which she knows about because she read about it.
Yes.
She goes home to wash off the blood and pray the night away. But her mom has a different plan. She tries to kill Carrie, but Carrie crucifies her. The house collapses in on itself, and everyone is left wondering what happened that night and why a whole gym full of kids died. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sue is left severely traumatized.
Yeah, Sue is the only one who's spared.
Yep. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, if we're starting from like the beginning of the movie, I think that, and sort of like the, I feel like maybe like one of Carrie's like defining moments when it comes to sort of like her, I guess, development of powers through, because she does develop these powers through trauma, and I feel like one of the defining sort of like moments that sort of like, you know, gets the ball rolling is the period, when she gets her period in the shower.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's interesting when we're watching this movie, it's sort of, you know, I mean, we see Carrie, she's being bullied, like, on the, you know, on the volleyball court. But I think that's interesting, this movie does such a cool thing where it sort of takes these really serene, sort of like slow moments, and then it will like immediately after hit you with these like really gritty, sort of like loud, like chaotic situations.
And okay, I have a really interesting note about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
In every situation, not every situation, but for the most part, when there are three major, serene, kind of like dream-like, beautiful moments.
Yes.
That is her when she's showering.
Yeah.
Her before the blood gets dropped on her at prom.
Yeah.
And then Sue when she's dreaming during her trauma.
Yeah, it has that glowy kind of effect.
Yeah. Every single one of them is interrupted by blood.
Oh, yeah.
And every single one of them is I think it kind of has the implication of like womanhood.
Yes.
And like womanhood is traumatizing, and it'll like rip you out of like this serenity and this peace.
Yeah.
So because first scene, literal period. And then second scene, it's like she's being crowned, she's having this beautiful like almost like princess moment. But then actually like the reality of it is like boom, pig's blood.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, like Sue is having like this dream state where she's putting flowers on what would be Carrie's grave. Carrie doesn't get a grave because, you know, no funeral for her, nobody to bury her. And the hand pops out. And I thought that it was so interesting that all these moments of serenity are interrupted by just like blood.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I definitely do think, upon watching it, I definitely noticed a theme of sort of like trauma passed down through women.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really similar to like ginger snaps in that way.
Yeah.
Of this idea of like womanhood being sort of like a curse, you know?
Yeah.
And sort of dreading it somehow.
Yes.
So, but I think that definitely Carrie is different in that there are serene moments of womanhood, but then all of a sudden it's just sort of like it'll hit you like a brick wall, and it's just like
the entire
trauma.
locker room scene is just like, this is girlhood.
Yeah.
Like this is like something that is beautiful and something that is put on a pedestal, and like look at all these girls and they're laughing and they're naked and like look at them just like being girls.
Yeah.
And then what interrupts it? Ew, period.
Yeah, and she's like screaming and grabbing at people, and like, she's
yeah.
got blood on her hands. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely saw that. And I definitely think there's also a sense of ostracization, like in womanhood. You know, I feel like Carrie is sort of like ostracized for her womanhood. She's ostracized by like the school. She's ostracized by like her own mother.
Yeah.
So I think that was also really interesting. That sort of like that solitary, like lonely feeling of being like alone with sort of like this shame of like being a woman, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see it when the gym teacher, what's her name again? Mrs. Collins.
Is it Mrs. Collins?
Miss Collins?
I think it's is it Mrs. Collins? It was I just said the gym teacher because I was so tired of like looking up the name. I was just
Yeah.
like the gym teacher.
Yes.
So and I don't think we ever learned her first name, do we?
No.
I think it's just like Mrs. something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can call her gym teacher.
Gym teacher. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gym teacher lady.
Gym teacher lady. That one person who teaches gym.
Yeah.
Yeah. When she is speaking to the principal, and she's got the blood on her gym shorts, and he looks over, and then he's like, okay, just get her out of here, I guess.
Oh my god. The men in this movie are so funny because and they're so infuriating because I feel like throughout the whole movie, like the women have these like really like complicated motives and they have these like really like intricate like relationships and like
Yeah.
stuff like that. But the men are so apathetic.
Yeah.
They're so apathetic and they're so like useless and they're like they have like no motive but
so
they're
easily
but
manipulated.
they're influenced by the women around them. And so they're literally like they literally do nothing unless women tell them to do something. And it's funny because, you know, the gym or the principal was just kind of like, "Oh, like I don't know, we can't, we can't, interfere with people's beliefs and like, oh, like do you like want to lay down?" But the gym teacher was like, "No, she has to go home."
Yeah.
You know, so she told him, the principal, like, "No, send her home." And he's like, "Okay, I guess I'll send her." So it's just like these guys are just like very like lackadaisy, but the women around them are like, "No, do this, you know what I mean? So
it feels like the men are an extension of the women.
exactly.
Like in this film, like and in that way, this is a feminist film in that sense.
Too, yeah.
Because the most complex and the most interesting characters in this film, they're all women.
They're all women, yeah.
Tommy's motivations are pretty like they're pretty surface level.
Yeah.
They're like, girlfriend told me to go to dance.
Yeah.
Girl pretty, I kiss her.
Yeah, and then it's even funny, like, John Travolta's character, the only reason why he's doing what Chris tells him to do is because she, like, gives him head.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's also really funny because, like, I don't know. Just, I feel like the women are still, this is a feminist film to me because the women are still they're still suffering because of these, like, patriarchal standards, and they're, still suffering in that way. And biblical, patriarchal biblical standards.
Yeah.
They're still suffering, but they're still essentially telling men what to do. So I think to me, it sort of reads as like, the men don't really care, and they don't have to care, because they're living under this, sort of system that sort of like benefits them. But the women have to sort of
engage with the world.
They have to engage with the world. They have to engage with each other. They have to sort of be mean. They have to sort of, come up with like all these like schemes and stuff like that, because that's how they're going to survive, and that's how they're going to make it. And to me, I think that's one way where two wrongs make a right when Stephen King wrote this novel, because
he was probably like, women are bitches.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, but I think when you bring in that biblical sort of aspect, and you sort of bring in this sort of, sort of like detail of like the men being sort of like uncaring and sort of like apathetic, I think it makes sense. It's like, yeah, women are going to be bitches, because women are literally just trying to make it in the world. Like,
yeah.
So.
And I think that if you spoke to Stephen King, he would have like a different like understanding of how he wrote it.
Yeah, for sure.
But this is ours now. You put it out. It's ours.
You put it out in the world. It's ours now. Carrie is for the girls.
It is for the girls.
It definitely is, yeah. And I almost wonder, like, I haven't read the book. I know my mom is, like, a big Stephen King fan, and she's, like, read the book. So I'd be really curious to, like, ask her, like, how different the book is, like, from the movie. And I almost wonder, like, how much more of, like, a feminist take, quote-unquote, the movie took than the book. But, yeah, so...
That is interesting.
Yeah, definitely have to see, but...
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk for a second about Carrie's house.
Yeah.
Because, oh my god, I would be anxious and depressed also if I lived in that home.
Yeah, I think the house is essentially, like, foreclosed, right?
Yeah.
It's foreclosed, and it doesn't have, like, any power.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's basically living in a cottage. And that was one of the things that I noticed, too, about the film, is that the film... Like, watching it again, like, because I've seen it before, but, like, watching it again with, like, a critical eye, I was like, oh, my gosh, like, this film has so many fairy tale elements.
Mm-hmm.
Like the mom is sort of like the first time we see her, she sort of has like that cloak on and she looks very witchy.
Mother Gothel vibes.
Yes, I literally got that vibe. And then like her house is very like, it's like sort of like run down, but like there are certain like details. So like the archways, like the little like the walkways into like the kitchen. There's it looks very like castle-y, like that sort of like pointed sort of like thing going on. And there's also like this element of like Carrie being sort of like held away by her mother, very like Rapunzel vibes. And then she sort of like goes to the ball and like stuff like that. So definitely like upon like seeing the house and seeing the mom, I was like, oh, this is literally like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the mother is like, there are so many moments where she's framed in this kind of like cross.
Yeah.
And I think that is that's foreshadowing, but also, I think that I think that the mother's trauma was kind of her crucifixion.
Yes.
And her mistake is passing it on to Carrie.
Yeah.
But this woman is traumatized, and we can and we should be very critical of her, but she's also like very like unwell and unable to seek help.
Yeah.
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 So that is also something that I was thinking about, because religion for a lot of people can be a positive thing, but for others it can, warp your mind and your reality and your sense of worth.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I think, it's interesting that when we first meet the mom and the mom sort of gets the call on the phone about the period, she sort of preaches to Carrie about like the sins of the first sin being intercourse, and sort of like, Eve being weak. She's sort of like preaching these very like misogynistic sort of takes on the Bible, and these sort of really misogynistic teachings of the Bible. And so you definitely, I feel like in that way, when you're watching it, you're definitely getting this feeling that the trauma that these women are enduring are greater than them. It's more than Carrie's mom. It's like, it's beyond them, and it's like in that way it feels so hopeless. Like you feel like Carrie's like hopelessness.
Yeah.
Like when she's like on the floor being hit in the face with a book, and she's like in the closet and stuff. It feels like this is like a power that's like greater than what's happening in the house.
Yeah. Also, through the last couple episodes that we've done, I've realized there's a horror trope of people hiding in closets.
Oh.
And it comes up really often, and I think it's more so to do with like the fact that the closet is a confined space, and it's like small, claustrophobic, and for some people it can be kind of like a safe haven, and for depending on the scenario it can be either a safe haven or like a
scary place,
a place of abuse.
Yeah.
And for Carrie, she's got that terrifying Jesus figure in there. Oh my.
Oh, with the glowing eyes and like stuff like that.
That's freaky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the closet comes back in a different way later on.
Yeah.
So which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Catholicism always has the most like gruesome depictions of like Jesus on the cross.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, well, let me put this in my kid's room, and like Jesus is like ripped, and like his hands are all bloody, like you can see like all the details, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well, because I think there's a certain element of like you should be suffering all the time.
Yeah,
every day.
That is at the core of Catholicism.
Yeah,
it's like, to some extent, I think that Catholicism is really rooted in the hope that you will strive for perfection because Jesus died for your sins.
Yeah.
And because Jesus died for your sins, why would you be anything less than perfect?
Yeah, and if you
maybe not in like the doctrines, but in the culture.
Yeah.
The culture of Catholicism.
Yeah. I think definitely there's historically definitely think there's been this sentiment that like if you suffer enough, maybe then God will like see you and see your suffering and feel bad for you, and you'll have paid for the things for your sins in life, which I feel like in Carrie, there's definitely like that sentiment, but it feels like never ending. Like it's never good enough, and it's unpredictable.
Like
so.
at what point will you have paid for your sins?
Exactly.
Enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with the mom.
Yeah, and I think it's also really interesting because I was reading some behind the scenes stuff, and I mean, Sissy Spacek, she went all out, and we'll talk more about it like throughout the podcast, but I mean, she went all out, and apparently, when she was sort of researching for this role, she was reading this like illustrated. She was studying the illustrations in this Bible that she had. And she was studying the posture of people who were being stoned to death. And so she would study that before every single scene. And so that's why when a lot of that's why she's so hunched over, and that's why she does such a good job at just
being
always
so
small and seeming always just like on edge. You know what I mean? Like she's about to like get hit. Like and so I think that, and I think it's interesting that she chose that sort of like detail to incorporate into her character, like specifically like the person about to be stoned.
Yeah, because why are people stoned?
For
Adultery.
Yeah.
And it's like the mother's so scared of like the threat that she will be interested in men.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like she has this power over Carrie, but she also doesn't.
Yeah.
She's like trying to keep her.
I think that what it is that Carrie loves her mother, but Carrie doesn't believe anything she says.
Yeah.
Carrie has like a deep love for her mother, I think. Yeah. But she's like, oh, that Bible stuff, like, not working for me.
Yeah, and I think that, like, I mean, maybe speaking personally, I feel like that's, like, I feel like that's a sentiment that, like, a lot of girls have with their moms. It's just sort of, like, especially, like, when you grow up in, like, a very patriarchal sort of environment or, like, under patriarchal, like, teachings. I guess it's just anyone that lives in society.
Yeah.
But you sort of have this love for your mom, but you also have a lot of, like, resentment for your mom, and you sort of mourn your mother because you feel like a lot of her personality is sort of drowned out by these sort of like ideas and like but you also you feel bad for her, like you want to like you want to love her, but it's so hard, and you flip-flop like back and forth, and you feel her pain, but she also inflicts that pain on you. So
that I think that's a perfect description of it. Another detail, Carrie, after being locked in the closet, thanks her mom. She's like, thank you.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think that that's just something that victims of parental abuse tend to do.
To placate the abuser,
They'll say, yes, I did deserve that. Because it'll be easier for them in the future. And that is really heartbreaking. Because she obviously doesn't believe that she deserved that, and she obviously didn't deserve that. And it's just something that she has to do to survive in her household.
Yeah, and then I like how she sort of comes out of the closet and she's like, oh, like, thank you, Mama, and then she goes upstairs, and then she has that really intense scene where she breaks the mirror with her mind. She's looking in the mirror, and she just has this like moment of like rage, and it just sort of like warps the mirror until it like shatters. You know what I mean? So and then the mom sort of hears it, and she goes upstairs. She's like, "What's that noise?" Like, and so I think in some extent her mom knows that she's breaking her daughter. Her daughter's reaching a breaking point. But I think that she's going to try to inflict more punishment on Carrie to keep that down. But when really in reality, it's just pushing her more and more and more. Yeah,
and it's because parents, I think, tend to not understand, maybe today less so, but parents especially back then tend to not understand what pressure does and how really children's minds work. Because Carrie is supposed to be, 16, 17?
Yeah, something like that,
Like, she's a child. And, like, her mom, not a developmental expert on children.
I think also there's this sense that, like, she thinks that this sort of monstrous thing inside Carrie is sort of just coming from, it's just inherent to Carrie. And I think you definitely also get that because, she says, like, she's talking about like Eve and like the first sin and stuff, and like women are just, you get the sense that women are just inherently evil. She believes that, and so I think that's where she thinks it's coming from, when really it's coming from her punishing Carrie to try to keep her from reaching that potential.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like she's very like she's
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and she's aware, but she's also delusional. You know, it's sort of, she's aware, but it's sort of like warped by this religion that she's like sort of absorbed with. So
Yeah. Okay, so Carrie's researching miracles. She knows something is up.
Yeah.
And
I also wanted to say that there's, in the gym scene, because all the girls that made fun of Carrie in the shower when they threw like the tampons and stuff at her, all of those girls have to do, is it detention? They're in detention, right? They have to do a week's worth of detention, and they have to do like gym detention, which is like you have to like run and shit like that.
Yeah.
But there's a girl when they're in the gym. There's a girl that like when they're like lined up. There's a girl in the front row who looks exactly like Barb from Stranger Things. Like she has the blush glasses and everything. And I was like, oh, this must have been like a type of girl. Like for sure. It's so interesting like looking at everyone's like outfits and everything like throughout the movie, because you're like, oh, that's like so like 70s. You know, like. So it's really funny. And I think that we should bring back those gym shorts.
Yeah,
I'm kind of wearing those gym shorts today.
I am.
Yeah.
A little bit.
The red gym shorts,
Yeah.
We need to bring those back. Because they make your legs look really good.
They do, yeah. And I think it's interesting that, okay, well, first of all, gym detention, if you gave me gym detention, that would work on me. I would never do anything
No,
again.
literally, that's what I thought. I was like, no.
Yeah, I'd be like, dude, you got me. Like, straight as an arrow. Like, I'm not doing anything.
I'll be best friends with Carrie White.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and the other thing I found interesting is that Chris it's implied that she has this inherent pull over everyone. She has this kind of like power. She's got this pull.
Yeah.
She has zero pull when put against the gym teacher.
Yeah.
Everyone is like terrified of her.
Dude.
Rightfully so, because she is... I have complicated thoughts about the gym teacher, because on the one hand, she's very sweet and nurturing toward Carrie, but on the other hand, she is blatantly abusive to her students.
Yeah.
And I don't enjoy that. I don't like that. I don't think that even Chris, who's a terrible person, as, you know, a 17-year-old, 16-year-old, deserves to be hit by her teacher. I think that, especially at that age, you can be a good person afterwards.
Yeah, and I definitely got that vibe. I think that's sort of a testament to the times. I feel like gym teachers were like sort of allowed to do that, and I feel like it was sort of expected of them to sort of like be like an asshole to their kids.
To be more like physical and to be more like demanding and powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I know that's probably the reason why, because she reminds me actually of a gym teacher that I had when I was in middle school. She was so mean, but she wasn't like mean. She was just like mean girl mean. You know what I mean? And I remember this one girl did get her period in middle school, and like the other girls made fun of her, and she literally like all those girls had detention, and I just remember her being like, she was like, that was a really shitty thing of you to do, like instead of acting like a bunch of bitches, like maybe you should like actually like help somebody. Like she was like mean, you know what I mean? And so like watching this, I was like, oh my god, like I've literally known gym teachers like that. Like and so I definitely think that, and I think that Stephen King was sort of aware of like how women sort of like never escape that sort of like adolescent stage. And I think that's sort of a part of his misogyny, but I also feel like it's sort of a testament to like how the gym teacher is really, at the end of the day, she's just kind of like one of the girls, because she wants to help Carrie, but she's also like mean to the other girls, and she's also like, you know, even in like the principal's office, she was just like, well, like I just like wanted to grab her and shake her too, and just be like, you know, it's just your period, you know, like she's sort of like, she's definitely like, I think that she sees a part of herself in Chris. Maybe that's just me reaching, but I just definitely think
I think you're definitely right.
That's why she can go up toe to toe to Chris and be like, you know, like, I don't care what you do with your
like,
gum,
okay,
you can choke on it.
I can be a bitch too.
Yeah, like, literally. So, and I think that it's so funny, like, how Chris is sort of this, like, formidable foe for Carrie, but the gym teacher is just, like, she just, like, absolutely humbles her.
Yeah, and it also goes to show that, like, there are really picking on the most vulnerable person, because put Chris, even like Sue, who is very soft spoken and
Yeah.
like not very fiery, like as a person.
Yeah.
Even she is like, just shut up, Chris, like just shut up, and that's enough. Like
Yeah.
that, like done. And it's so interesting that like she only has power when put up against like this person who's been made to feel small her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think that with Chris getting kicked out, she eventually is like, I'm not gonna do this, and she gets, the one of the conditions for detention was if you don't do detention, you don't get to go to prom.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that there's, with her being gone, with her getting kicked out, there's definitely that sense of the ostracization again, of ostracization of womanhood.
Yeah.
But I think it's, it's sort of contrasts sort of Carrie's
Yeah.
ostracization in a way.
Yeah.
So
And do you know what else is contrasted that I found really interesting? The
What's that?
two couples, Tommy and Sue,
Yeah.
and Chris and Billy.
Yeah.
Chris and Billy are like out drinking
Yep.
and like
calling, verbally abusing each other, but also
physically abusing
he's
each other.
physically abusing her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just overall like having like a very like tumultuous, very like physical relationship, but also
Yeah.
there's like a lot of attraction there, and
Yeah.
like it's a really concerning
It's very hot and cold.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very concerning.
Yeah. And then it's contrasted by like Sue and Tommy quietly doing homework and watching TV.
Yeah.
And they're just like hanging out.
Yeah.
Tommy writes poetry.
Yeah.
Like they're just
Yeah.
relaxing.
Yeah, you can see that they're sort of like popular, but they're popular because they're sort of just like a very agreeable set of people. Whereas with like Chris and her boyfriend, they're popular because Chris is kind of mean, and she sort of like creates this like environment where like if you're not with me, then like I'm against you.
Yeah,
So.
and I do think that they're also popular just because they're gorgeous people.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that like even if regardless of what they were going to do, because they're as gorgeous as they are, they're going to have some level of popularity.
Yeah, and I definitely think that watching the scene with Chris and her boyfriend in the car, I can definitely see that like the book was written by a man, because the way that sort of the scene in the car sort of unfolds, I'm like, no woman ever acts that way, but I know of similar incidents where things like that happen, and I feel like it's always because the guy is being like pushy and she's saying no, and then he acts like a dick and he's like trying to guilt her into it. And so definitely like watching that, I was like, no woman acts this way. Like this is definitely like viewed through like a man's sort of like lens, you know what I mean?
Yeah. The
but-
inherent like of her like being so
Being,
enthusiastic after blatantly saying no.
No, and then also being like crazy, being like hot and cold. She's just like she's like no, and then she's like, oh, like come here, and then she's like no. He's like, oh, you're being like fucking crazy. I was like, no girl ever does that.
And really, what she said slow down.
Yeah.
And he says, slow down. Like why do I have to slow down? We've done this a million times.
Yeah.
And then she says, you're so ignorant.
Yeah.
Which fair.
I know, right?
That is ignorant.
There are moments where you definitely do feel bad for Chris. And,
Yeah.
and to me, in that way, that's, again, sort of reiterating this idea that, the abuse is beyond the women. Like, this sort of cruelty is beyond them. It's sort of, like, being channeled through them at each other.
Yeah.
And the men there's like no consequences for them. I mean, until the very end, but there's just absolutely no consequences. So
Yeah, but there's no additional consequences for the men.
True,
Because at the end, everyone dies.
Yeah.
And they're all dead.
Yeah.
But the girls just had a worse time.
No, they did. Yeah, and it all revolved around them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
and
So
they were the ones who were traumatized. They were the ones who really
they were more thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It impacted them like more on like a psychological level, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, especially Sue.
Yeah, especially
So,
Sue.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Carrie's researching.
Yes.
And why does every library and every horror movie has an occult section, especially at your high school? If you're in a horror movie and you need to figure out what's going on, go to your school library.
Let's
'Cause
be
they're gonna
real.
have an occult section.
A library in the 70s.
Yes. is probably
not gonna have an
gonna
occult section.
Yeah, especially in 1976, which I believe was sort of like
The middle of the Satanic Panic.
I think it was like the beginning of the Satanic Panic. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was, yeah.
There's not gonna be an occult section. What are you doing?
I know. Yeah, it's
Filmmakers.
Filmmakers,
Make 'em work
you
a little
guys
more.
are silly. Although I will say that my public library in my small town did have an occult section. So,
Yeah.
but that was a public library,
Yeah.
which is more believable.
Yeah.
Unless I'm living in a horror
because
movie.
it's funded by the government.
By the government.
Who
And they want us to
loves
know,
the occult?
Yes, they want us to know how to do
Yeah.
witchcraft.
Pro Satan.
They want 16-year-old girls to know how to do witchcraft after
Yeah.
school.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. They're gonna
yes.
make a little love potion
Yeah.
or put like, I don't know.
They know that the real weapons are 16-year-old girls who want to know how to do witchcraft and
Yeah.
summon ghosts. So
Yeah.
or move things with their mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she learns about telekinesis, which is the ability to move things with your mind. So, and
Yeah.
that's what she sort of I think at that point she sort of like accepts what's going on, because throughout the movie, the beginning of the movie, weird stuff's happening around her every time she has like this emotional outburst. And then at that moment, I think she sort of realizes what's happening, and I feel like she's like more okay with it.
Yeah.
She's just kind of like, oh, like
Yeah.
this explains everything.
Yeah, it's controlled and it's very like just like, oh.
Yeah, and I think that also is, it shows how maybe her mom, she's not completely immune to her mom's influences, because she's just sort of like, she accepts this sort of like supernatural explanation for what's
Yeah.
going on with her. Yeah.
Yeah, and takes it really at face value.
Yeah, and she calls it a miracle too.
Yeah.
She doesn't call it like, like witchcraft or anything.
Yeah.
She's researching miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is also interesting because like on the flip side, her mom would call it like satanic.
Yeah,
But she reads the same Bible and she's like, "Oh, this is a miracle. I can move stuff with my mind."
Yeah.
And it really goes to show like different interpretations.
Yeah.
That like you can read the same thing and get totally like vastly different interpretations.
Yeah.
And they're colored by your perspective in your life and what your actual beliefs are.
Yeah.
So even the most Christians, when you're reading the Bible, you're not reading the Bible.
Yeah.
You're reading the Bible through the perspective of your life and your beliefs and your specific lens at this specific time. And I think that people who read the Bible are just like, well, I just take it at face value. I read what it says and I'll listen to it. No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
I
Because you're lying right now.
It's funny because every time I'm like, I don't understand why there's so many different flavors of church and why there's so many different religions. If you guys all believe in the same thing, like what's going on? But it really does boil down to just the culture around it. You know what I mean? And so I think it's, like you said, I think it is really funny when people are just like, we have the right interpretation of the Bible and we just take it at face value. It's just like, actually, you are forming a culture around, a piece of text that was written thousands of years ago. And so it's never going to be the same as somebody else's, interpretation of that.
And it's also so funny because like every denomination is like, they're in a denomination. The way that denominations happen is that you're in it and then somebody's like, hey, I don't like this one part. And then more people are like, yeah, I don't like that one part either. Let's get out of here. We're doing our own thing. And then they go over there. And then somebody over there, like 5 years from then, is like, hey, I don't like this one part, actually. And then everybody's like, yeah, I don't like that either. Bonk, go, leave again. That's what denominations are.
Does the Eucharist change when it hits your mouth, or does it change when you swallow it? Two groups think otherwise.
Yeah.
So
is this
they're
the
gonna fight
actual
forever?
Physical body of
Christ.
God, or is this a
symbolic?
metaphor?
They're gonna fight forever about it.
Yeah.
They might even kill each other over it. You know. So
Yeah. Churches are just crazy.
They're crazy. It's really like the battle of the book clubs. Really. Yeah.
I want to just gloss over this for a moment because it's not it's significant to the plot, but it doesn't really add any like oomph. Like Tommy asks Carrie to the prom.
Yeah.
And badgers her.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Goes to her house, dude. That's
and she's
too
like,
much.
you can't be here because my mom is abusive as fuck.
Yeah, and
then
she's
he's like,
frightened.
I'm not gonna leave. Yeah, I got that too, and I remember like watching the movie when I was like a teenager and like stuff like that, and sort of like it was kind of like, oh, this is just like guy hijinks.
Yeah.
But then I watched it and I'm like, he needs to go. Like, he needs to leave her alone. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
as an adult, it has a different color to it. When you
Yeah.
watch it and you realize, like, he went to her house? He
Yeah.
doesn't know her like that.
I know.
You don't know her like that. Why are you going to her house?
Yeah, and then also, I mean, I guess it was the 70s, so you just
Yeah.
kind of like show up at people's place. But like,
Yeah.
nobody like locks their doors or shit.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, he did also see her in the library, and he's just sort of trying to talk to her, and she doesn't want to talk to him, and she's
Yeah.
there's this like, I mean, and it does come like from a place of fear. Like, I definitely think that she maybe likes him a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think that she kind of like likes him from a distance, and I think there's this sort of fear that like he's gonna know, and he's associated with this group of girls that are mean to him, and so I think that she's afraid that like this is just another extension of the abuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And she definitely is interested. She definitely
Yeah.
does like him, I would say. But yeah, she even says, like, I'm not stupid. Like, I
Yeah.
know what's going on here.
yeah, and it's also this sort of you feel Carrie's like loneliness in this way also, where she sort of is always watching from a distance because she has her mom, and her mom is sort of like always looming over her shoulder whether she's physically there or not. And there's always this like threat of like, and I mean just her lifestyle, it's just sort of like she has to watch from a distance because she lives so far out of the realm of like normal people.
Yeah, she's so isolated
Yeah.
in so many different ways.
Yeah, and so I think like Tommy showing up at her house was kind of like very frightening for her because he's sort of like coming into her world,
Yeah.
and she's like, no, like you need to go, like you
Yeah.
need to get out of here. She's like sort of like warning him,
Yeah.
and he's just being a teenage boy, and he's not
Yeah.
taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
So
Annoying.
annoying, so annoying.
Yeah.
Stop asking people. You know what? That literally happened to me. Well, not literally, because my mom's not like a religious zealot or anything,
Yeah.
but like,
Literally, the plot of Carrie happened to me, and I murdered my entire high school
I just
auditorium.
like burned down the whole high school. Oh my god, I forgot about that. No, literally like, I really hope she doesn't listen to this podcast. But there was a girl in high school, and like, we kind of became like friends, and like we were kind of interested in each other, but like I was kind of like really not, and I just didn't really like wanna do that kind of thing. And then she asked me, she was like, are you going like to prom or like anything, or like or like, you know, would you go to prom? And I was like, no, I don't like prom, because I just didn't want to deal with like the social thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't like prom. I never want to go to prom. But she asked me out anyways, and she bought me this really expensive like rainbow rose.
No.
And then I was like, I know, and so I was like, well, now I feel like I have to. And then like, but I was just also kind of like, I was hopeful about it. I was like, maybe it will be a good time. And then it was really not a good time. So it was like, Carrie White is so real to me in so many ways. I
Yeah.
know. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just if somebody says, I think that it should be more normalized for girls to say no to prom, because I feel like
Yeah.
there is a lot of pressure for girls to say yes to prom.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot of times because they get ambushed like this, or like ambushed like in public with like big signs like, will you go to prom with me? And then they
Yeah.
feel like they have to say yes. Otherwise, if they say no, then they're like a bitch.
Yeah.
Because like he put in like so much time, and he's trying so hard, and he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
So
Maybe like feel it out first, dude. Like
Yeah, or,
maybe
like-
before you make the sign, ask her.
yeah, or like ask maybe like one of her friends, like, hey, like, can you ask her and see if she, you know,
Wants to go with
yeah,
me.
feel it out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, I'm gonna guilt her into going with
Yeah.
me.
Like you have to now. Like I made the sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's like the worst handwriting
yeah.
in the world.
In the world. And it's
Yeah.
like ugly as hell.
Or
yeah.
their friend, who's a girl, did it. And the handwriting is lovely.
That's rough. If
Yeah.
you get her friends to make the sign for you,
Mm-hmm.
that's rough. Like,
Yeah.
yikes.
Okay. So pigsty scene.
Oh my god. No, we need a mascot. And I was thinking we need a mascot, and I feel like we should have like a pig mascot. Because
Oh,
pigs
thanks.
show up in horror movies all the time.
Yeah.
They really take the brunt of like
And
everything.
they're really cute and really smart.
They really are. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
feel like pigs are also really scary because they look kind of human, and they
Uh-huh.
have like human feelings, and they scream.
Yeah, they do scream, yeah.
Yeah, but we eat them, which is like,
Well,
I mean,
I
you
don't.
don't eat them. I eat them.
Yeah.
But like they are, yeah, they're like, and so I think they're especially like this couldn't have like happened, like this scene couldn't have happened if it was like goats or like cows or anything like
No,
that.
it wouldn't
had
have
to happen with pigs because there's something about them crawling over that wall to bludgeon a pig to death
Yeah.
with Carrie in mind, that is like so like it's so icky.
And then there is that connection that they explicitly make, like, oh, girls as pigs, like girls as, and it's like, pigs are cute.
Yeah, pigs are cute, and they're very social.
They are.
They're so social. So maybe girls are like pigs.
Yeah.
We're all cute.
Yeah.
And social.
Yeah.
We're also screaming all the time.
Yeah.
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 And just want to roll around in some mud.
Yeah, we want to be dirty.
Yeah.
And I think that's also like that also adds to this sort of like aspect of, like this horror aspect where you're sort of like in the filth with these like creatures that are sort of like associated with the filth. They're like down in the filth, like bludgeoning this pig to death to pull on Carrie, and that's like so terrifying. And
Chris doesn't want to get her hands dirty, but she is ecstatic that this pig is gonna get bludgeoned to death.
Yeah, with Carrie in mind. It's all about Carrie, and I think it's so funny because, well, it's not funny, but I think it's interesting the way that this movie sort of shows like the influence of like these women over like the men around them, and it's sort of, she's just standing off to the side on the gate and she's just going like, do it, and so she's not physically bludgeoning this pig, but she's getting somebody else to do it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
She is the one doing it by extension.
Yeah, by extension.
But he's doing he's getting his hands dirty.
Yep. Yeah. For her.
Because she's got soft hands. Yeah.
I think that sort of, it also really shows how willing they are to be cruel.
Yeah.
And how willing she is really to be cruel just for her malice or malice for Carrie.
Yeah, out of like nothing but spite.
Yeah, and I also think I did make a note that I think that she sort of extends the abuse that she suffers to Carrie.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of, I mean, throughout the whole movie, I think there's this sort of like notion of like, again, like women, being channels through which like patriarchal abuse is sort of like kind of flows through to other women, and they inflict that on like the women around them.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Carrie's getting ready for prom.
Yeah.
And I love this scene because it's the Last Supper.
Oh, and they have the tapestry of the Last Supper in the background too.
It's her
over
Last
the
Supper,
dining
and
table.
it's the Last Supper.
Yeah.
And then you've got this ominous like lightning and thunder.
Ooh, and then doesn't she say like, I'm going to prom, and then there's like a lightning crack?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's why I wrote like
She's
the heavy metal
I'm going
font.
to prom, mama.
Yeah.
And then it's like.
Yeah. Doom.
Yeah. Water splash. How jarring and unpleasant would it be to just like your mother just like water on your face?
I know, that's so rude.
Yeah.
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 I've had my sisters throw water on me, but I've never had my mom throw water on me, and I feel like that would hurt more.
Yeah, and it is like a very like I don't want to say it's like a low level, like not low level, but it's like a very casual form of abuse, I feel like.
Yeah.
Cuz like that is like a physical shock to you.
Yeah.
But also that would be like very hurtful to your feelings.
Insulting,
It's like yeah, it's like very insulting, very degrading.
Yeah.
So they're having this conversation, and Carrie says everything isn't a sin.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's very telling because especially I grew up Catholic, and like everybody tries to make everything a sin.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, you're hanging out with a boy, sinning. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're doing this, sinning. And it's like, no. Where does it say that?
Yeah.
Where does it say that?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is like particularly like Carrie has been forced to read the Bible, and she knows the Bible, and she says everything isn't a sin, and she's right. You know, like they're reading the same book again.
Yeah.
Their different life experiences are tinting it.
Yeah.
And the mom's trauma is definitely tinting it.
Yeah, there's definitely this, sort of like, it definitely seems like the mom isn't, it definitely seems like when people want to inflict control over other people using religious means, it definitely seems like they sort of can like just if they connect enough dots back to this one thing that's said in the Bible, then like they can justify this sort of like abuse, or they can justify this sort of like outlook that they have on the situation.
Yeah.
And it definitely seems like the mom isn't, I don't think she's really doing it because she's doing it for her belief. She's doing it because she wants to control Carrie, but she's using religious means to control Carrie. It's just sort of her own feelings, but she's using religion to like sort of harm Carrie.
Yeah, and I do think that they're very closely tied. I think that she wouldn't recognize that she's using religion to control Carrie, but I think that she is.
Yeah.
And it's very like blatantly apparent to us, but to her, she's like, no, what do you mean? Like, that's the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also noticed that when her mom is praying, she's like rocking back and forth. And what does that look like?
The rocking back and forth?
She's
like,
kind of like rocking back and forth.
What does it look like, Jenny?
Looks like sex.
Yeah. I don't want to say it about
yeah, but she has taken religion and she's demonized sex, but it has taken the place of sex for her.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, a lot of her trauma came from from sex.
Yeah,
so
it's sex-based.
Yeah.
And so she's like filling like this hole in her life, which is like to have like a healthy sex life, and she's filling it with, religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got this kind of like weird montage where like everybody's getting ready for prom, and then out of nowhere there's this little like comedy bit with like Tommy and his friends.
No, stop, because the part where he's like, I don't want to wear a tux, and then they get him that sweater tux. I was like, the youth of America have never changed.
Yeah.
They've always been the same, because that's literally the guy who shows up with like the
tuxedo t-shirt.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, the 70s had their own form. And also I love like the soundtrack of like the wow.
Yeah.
It was just so like,
and then at one
so
point
70s.
it like the short guy's talking, and then his line gets like sped up.
It speeds up. They're like sped up for some reason.
Like, what is going on here? Is this suddenly
like
a comedy?
Weirdest like little like montage ever.
Yeah, like what's with this little vignette? And I think it maybe is to contrast. Like this is the guys' relationships. Look at how funny and happy they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also just to sort of like lighten things before they fucking like, gut punch you.
Yeah.
So, because it's sort of like, it's funny, like they're sort of getting ready for prom, and then like Carrie is also getting ready for prom, and she's sort of like picking out lipsticks, which is like very like sweet.
Yeah.
And like normal.
She has so many like sweet girlhood moments.
Yeah.
In this film that really break my heart because you know what's coming.
Yeah.
And she's just at the end of the day, she's like a sweet young girl trying to fit in and trying to do her best to, like look pretty and like look desirable in a society.
She wants to like live.
Yeah. Yeah, and she wants to be happy and enjoy her life.
Yeah.
Also, tuxedo guy with the tuxedo t-shirt, everyone has to go to prom with a date. I'm pretty sure he's just a photographer. That guy doesn't even have a date.
Yeah, literally.
Like he just got in for free. Like.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
But the sweater tuxedo, I mean, that's popping off. Mm-hmm. Good job, sweater guy.
Yeah. You did a great job.
You did a great job, and I just think that I just saw that and I was like, no freaking way. Like literally, like there's always that one guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like universal, and it's also timeless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, so Carrie, looking all glammed up for prom, and her mom is like, they can see your dirty pillows.
When she says
what a
that
gross
every time,
line.
I know every time she
That's
says
so
that
nasty.
in the movies, I'm always like, that's the grossest way to describe breasts.
Yeah.
Like what?
It's like, if she's glammed up, let her be glammed up.
I know,
Stop.
but then Carrie, she does say like, well, their breasts, like every woman has them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, stop, like, demonizing this universal thing.
And also that sort of, it's continuing again, like that thing of like women are just like inherently sinful. So this idea, and so she's sort of like, but she's like sort of at this point like battling against her mom. Like her mom's like, oh, like everyone's gonna see your dirty pills, and she's like, Carrie's like, literally everyone has one mom. Like there's. Everyone has two. Yeah. Mom. Every woman has them. Like it's not bad. Like so.
And then there's the line, they're all gonna laugh at you. Yeah. And that really, even though Carrie is trying to brush it aside, that really resonates and sticks with her.
Yeah.
And it sticks with her because it's happened before.
Yep. And
you
I
know?
think she still has this suspicion of, like, is this going to be a prank? Like, are
Yeah.
they going to, like,
She's
actually...
not totally comfortable yet.
Yeah.
And I think that when she gets to the dance and people start being kind to her, and she starts meeting some of Tommy's friends who seem to be outside of the popularity circle, that's when she starts kind of like getting comfortable.
Yeah.
And it really is heartbreaking because this could have been the beginning of her life.
Yeah.
Because people are genuinely kind to her. And it's specifically the people who are in Tommy's circle who are outside of that kind of like popular, girlish, cliquish crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely, like, makes you wonder, like, what is the extent of the bullying that Carrie endures? It makes you wonder, like, is it just restricted to that one group of people, and then, like, that's just how she views herself, and, like, how she thinks that everyone else, like, views her? Or is it just, like, is it really everyone? You know what I mean? So,
I really strongly suspect that it is that one group of people.
yeah.
And that because she's so shy and she's so forced to interact with them so often, that it skews her perception of the rest of her relationships, and it also makes her more timid and less likely to talk to people who will be kind to her.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also very hard to make that call, because in the beginning, you know, you do see that kid who's like, oh, creepy Carrie, so that kind of establishes that she does have a reputation for being, like, the religious weirdo.
Yeah.
But
But he's also 12. Like a 12-year-old dummy.
That's true. And
12-year-olds are just saying stuff.
I know, yeah. And I think that's sort of, like, supposed to, like, give you, like, an idea of, like, how she's perceived, like, throughout the town. But,
and then
like,
she throws him off the bike.
she does throw him off the bike. Slay.
That was awesome.
More kids should be thrown off bikes. More kids should be thrown off bikes. That's a joke. In Minecraft. But also there's, you know, you can't help but wonder, like, do people just sort of like her at this point because she's associated with Tommy?
Oh.
You know what I mean? So that's why it's so confusing, where you're just kind of like, oh, see, they were like, there are people out there who are going to be nice to her, but then you're like, well, are they just being nice to her because of Tommy? Like, you know what I mean? So
but
it's hard to tell.
Even if they are, maybe that was just her break into, like...
Like just being social.
Yeah, just being social.
Yeah.
Just being, like, seen in a light where it's like, oh, she does want to talk to us.
Yeah.
You know, like, she's, like, a little less shy and timid now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carrie is so real to me also, just because, like, I was kind of like the loner in high school. Like, any girl who, like, grows up, like, being, like, really alone in high school, you're kind of like, I feel like there's always a moment where, like, you do branch out and you, like, do start to, like, socially interact with people, and you're like, could it have been this way the entire time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's, like, that really heartbreaking moment where you're just kind of like, maybe people didn't hate me as much as I thought they did. You know what I mean?
And the truth is, like, they probably didn't.
They probably didn't, and you're just sort of like, wow, like, I was, like, wasting, like, a lot of time, like, being miserable. And you definitely get that feeling watching this scene where you're just kind of like, maybe this could have been this way for Carrie the whole time. Like, maybe she could have had friends the entire time, but she was just sort of, like, constantly cowering because of this, like, one group of girls.
Yeah,
so.
she was on edge probably because
All the
that's
time.
what she's used to with her mother
Exactly.
and these girls.
Yeah, she's so secluded in, like, her mother's world that, like, basically her youth is being, like, taken away from her.
And
it's
her
so
mom
lonely.
does play into that kind of, like, delusion of, like, they all hate you. They're all gonna laugh at you.
Yeah, and, like, this is a godless world.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like us or them, and
Yeah.
you don't want to be them, so you should be with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so sweet, and the shot of them dancing and speaking, and the cameras moving around.
Moving around and around.
That
and
is
around.
my favorite movie shot of all time.
Really?
Carrie used to be my favorite movie.
Yeah.
And that specific shot is my favorite shot that's ever been recorded that I've ever seen.
Feel that sort of, like, that,
and,
like,
and it's so, like, diffused.
Yeah,
it's so,
glittery
like,
and, like,
yeah,
pretty.
Yeah, and you really, like, just get this sense of, like, oh, she's floating.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. And you sort of feel like she's, like, dizzy with love. Like, she's, like, sort of, like, she's giving in to this sort of, like, cloud nine, the state of being, like, on cloud nine. Like,
yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she's kind of also, like, she feels for the first time centered. Yeah, she's at the center.
Yeah.
Because this is common, like, in all framing, but especially with Carrie, she's off center a lot.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I think that might be.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, because, I mean, if you think about it, like, the shower scene, she's sort of, like, in the corner, and they're all throwing shit at her, and, like, you know, she's sort of, like, kind of, like, creeping around.
And, you know, that is common in, like, a lot of like that's just how you frame shots. So
Yeah.
maybe that I'm just like looking into it too much, but she just does kind of like tend to have like this that there's this feeling that she's always like off in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's sort of like, and I feel like there's always like there's always like sort of like barrier, like you
Yeah.
know, like there's always like barriers, and she's sort of like just like crouched or like in the corner
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and also I think it's interesting because you also get a kind of sense that maybe Tommy likes Carrie a little bit.
I got that sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got the sense that he perceives her as very authentic and sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's very like, I think he also kind of likes her because she's very like shy, and she's like, oh, like I can't like really do anything, you know what I mean? And he just sort of like reassures her, and you can kind of feel like in the beginning when they're at the table, he's just kind of like a little bit annoyed, or he's just kind of like, you know, like I guess I'll have to take you back early, you know, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But definitely like in that scene where you know, he's just sort of like, this is just how you dance, like it's fine, like just, you know, just like have a good time. Like you definitely get the sense that like maybe he likes her a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do feel like it's very complicated because he, of course, is dating Sue.
Right.
And
Sue asked him to go with her. So.
Yeah, and it's like, on the surface, it's like, okay, this is kind of a shitty thing.
Yeah.
But also, I don't think that he is, you know, very aware of anything.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah,
he's
he's
really
very
just
dumb.
a guy. Yeah.
But yeah, he does genuinely, I think, by the time he gets bonked in the head and he's just out,
Yeah.
I think that at that point he was like very actually like sincerely caring toward her.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
at that point, like him and Sue were like both committed to like the well-being of Carrie, which I think is so interesting. I love that like sort of dynamic where like the two like kind of popular people are just like, actually, you know what, like we do care about this one like really weird person that like they may, you know, like one of them kind of hurt and one of them just kind of doesn't care about. And then sort of like by the end there's a brief frame of time where they're both invested in like the happiness of Carrie.
Yeah.
So, and they're like looking out for her, and they're trying to stop like, you know, Chris from being a bitch. I mean, at least Sue was trying to stop Chris from being a bitch to Carrie and stuff like that.
So let's get to the bucket.
Yeah.
So Sue notices it.
Yeah.
And she's trying to stop it. And I always get so infuriated at this teacher because she just cannot believe that Sue is remorseful.
Yeah.
And it makes me especially mad because she believes that she can change, but she doesn't believe that Sue can change.
Yeah.
And I think that it is another like symptom of misogyny.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, you're just like a teenage girl.
You're just a bitch.
And like I'm an adult and I'm not a bitch.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Yeah, she's like constantly suspicious of her.
Yeah.
Despite like, you know, showing she let her boyfriend go to prom with Carrie.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And then also that scene where she's like it really starts to like slow down from there, right? Like the pace of the movie is like really, really slow. Everything's like kind of slow motion. And that like the moment where Sue is sort of sees the rope and she looks up and she's looking out, and then it pans over to the gym teacher and the gym teacher is looking at her looking up. That to me is so startling to me because like it gives me anxiety to watch it because you are watching people watch each other behave abnormally, and it has that certain like quality to it of like seeing like the like moments before like a school shooting where you're like those I'm watching them not behave right and they're watching somebody else not behave right, and something about seeing somebody like look up with like confusion or terror or concern at something that you can't see is like so frightening. Like you feel like oh shit, the ball is about to drop.
Yeah, and you perfectly put into words what I was trying to like figure out with like, why is this specific shot so effective at like freaking me out?
Yeah.
And it's like, this like unknown of what is going to happen next.
Yeah.
And this teacher is on edge.
Yeah.
She knows that Carrie is like vulnerable. She knows that there's kind of been this campaign to harass her, and she's looking out for the signs, and she just sees something, and then she's like, boom, this is my moment. Let me grab her. Let me get her out of here.
Why is Sue here, and why? What is she looking at?
Yeah, she's not allowed to be here. Boom. And you know, on that level, I think that teacher made the correct choice, and she is very protective and sweet. But I think that her like huge mistake is not believing in Sue's capacity to change.
Yeah, and also when Sue is sort of like, she sort of goes under the stairs to try to see what's going on, like why the rope is down there, and I think Sue maybe suspects Chris.
Yeah.
The teacher just sort of grabs her and like throws her out
Yeah.
instead of being like, what is down here? You know what I mean?
What is going on?
It's so frustrating to watch the gym teacher that way, where you're just kind of like, if you had just looked, if you had just seen Chris, then you would have understood what's happening.
Yeah, but she kind of gets like a little mama bear about it.
She does, yeah.
She's kind of like,
"You're
what
out."
are you doing? Bonk.
Yeah.
Like, out of here.
Yeah, which
You know?
is sort of like a, fatal flaw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bucket gets dropped.
Yes.
And, the surrealness, this beauty.
The
And,
iconic scene.
it perfectly mirrors, because I think that the first, when I gave this example in the beginning of, like, things being interrupted by blood.
Yeah.
These two are the more direct ones.
Yeah.
Where it's like Carrie is having this moment of like serenity and peace.
Yeah.
And then she's yanked away from it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so and I also made a note of when the scene starts and it gets really slow.
Yeah.
There's sort of this build up of music, and then the moment the blood is dropped, all you can hear, all the words, everyone talking is muffled, the laughing is muffled, the chaos is muffled, but all you hear is this dripping sound. It's just this liquid dripping.
And you also hear the bucket.
You do, yes, the like echoed like fall of the bucket. Yeah, which is so like I didn't like notice that in the first few times I watched the movie, but I did notice that like when I was like paying more attention, and I was like, what an amazing like use of sound. Like what an effective use and of sound and like lack of sound. You know what I mean? That sort of like where she's up on stage, and so she's sort of like having a moment of just absolute shock, so she can't hear everyone, but all she can hear is just this dripping sound, and you can sort of like feel it that way, where you can like feel the liquid dripping off of her, and then the sound resumes, and it sort of like fades back in, and then you're just kind of like, oh fuck, like now shit's hitting the fan.
And now it's like laughing.
It's catching up.
Yeah. And Tommy getting hit by the bucket is simultaneously like so sad and also hilarious, because I do think that he might have had the capacity at that moment to soothe her back to, a point of a feeling
equilibrium.
Yeah. And not having this huge, massive murder fest.
Yeah.
But he's out. He's gone. And I think that needed to happen, because otherwise she might have been able to like
be okay.
Soothed. Yeah.
Yeah, but she also was like very, very, like she was very hysterical.
Yeah. She went catatonic, I feel
She
like,
did,
for a
yeah.
moment.
And she didn't, it's interesting also because you don't really know, like, what's real, like, when you're watching her perspective. Like, you do know that she's kind of, like, it shows that sort of, like, what is that, like, the octagon sort of, like, kaleidoscope sort of effect. Where you're watching, people laugh at her and it's spinning around, and so there's that delirium kind of effect.
Yeah, and
but
you do
also,
know that at least Norma is definitely laughing.
Yeah.
I think that there's a point where, like, it passes from reality into her delusion.
You're like, what is delusion and what is reality?
Because I think that at first it's just a couple people. I think it's like Chris and Norma.
Yeah.
And they're the only two people, and everyone else you see is mortified.
It's kind of like, what
and
the
they're
fuck?
like, what is going on? Why did this happen to her?
Yeah.
And then, like, boom. Like it's her, like, vision or, like, delusion or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then everyone is laughing. And that is where she hits her breaking point, because her mother's words and her mother's, like, trauma come back to her. Yeah. And it's like, well, they're all going to laugh at you.
Yeah.
And
it's repeated, like, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all going to laugh at you. And that's what happens.
Yeah. And I think that, oh, by the way, a behind the scenes little fun fact.
Yeah.
So Sissy Spacek was a absolute stickler for consistency.
Oh. An
absolute stickler for consistency. And so it was too difficult for her. Well, first of all, the blood on her, it kept drying under all of the lights. The lights were very hot, so it kept drying, and so they would literally have to like hose her. To keep it moist, right?
Yeah.
And Sissy Spacek wanted it to be. She wanted the blood to be consistent between takes, and so she slept in her bloody clothes for 3 days. Yeah, 3 days straight
Oh my
to
gosh.
to keep it consistent.
What a queen.
I know, literally, like what a queen.
She's suffering for her craft.
Yeah, she is, and she definitely like she definitely deserves like the crown of being like an original like sort of like scream queen or whatever, because
Yeah.
like that like commitment to like being like no, I want the blood to look the same between every single takes, and like
Yeah.
sleeping in that, like that's like itchy as hell, like, you know.
It's so
And she
uncomfortable.
but she wanted it to be consistent between
Yeah.
those takes, and
Yeah.
I commend her for
And
that. So.
and you really like her performance.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And her eyes. And
Yeah.
because she kind of has these like big doe eyes.
She does.
And she's
they're
like
very blue.
yeah, very blue, like unnervingly blue.
Yeah.
And she kind of has these moments before where like her eyes go like really wide and you're like
she's like scared.
what's happening?
Yeah.
But this is a different type of wide.
Yeah.
This is like a more almost like manic.
She's like
before
vacant.
it was like oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like so scary, and now it's like she is the scary.
Yeah, and I
you
think
know?
I really enjoy the sort of like all of a sudden the switch to the red light. All of
Yeah.
a sudden it switches and everything is sort of bathed in this red light, and you can
Yeah.
barely even see the blood on Carrie because everything is red.
Yeah.
But you can also like just see her eyes, and she's just sort of like
Yeah,
you know,
her eyes
controlling
contrast
things
so strongly against the
strongly.
red.
Yeah, and it's so scary and unnerving. And I think if I recall correctly, I think there was like a sort of like continual like organ sort of like tone through the background,
Yeah.
and that just makes it it's like the fucking reckoning, like it's like
Yeah.
fucking Armageddon, like
Yeah.
you know. So it's like,
guys, this is your consequence.
and it's very biblical that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
said
She becomes
"Fuck you all."
God. Yeah, exactly.
God said you guys are done for.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. And then so she gets the fire hose, she electrocutes people,
Mhm.
she cuts the teacher in half with the structure
thing,
thing.
yeah.
She burns people.
Yep.
She's just
Yeah.
mass
Slaughter.
slaughter.
Hysteria too. People just
Mhm.
like running around the gym screaming, trying to get out.
And
Yeah.
Sue's trying to get in. She's like, "What is going
Yeah,
on in
yeah,
there?"
yeah.
And no second thought to Tommy.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Because, you know, he's just in her. I think she just reached her breaking point, and she
Yeah.
can't conceptualize anything
No,
anymore.
yeah.
She's just.
It's like
just gone.
everyone's gone. Everything's gone because like her world is crumbling away.
Mhm.
Like she's just like,
Mhm.
you know, she's done.
And in the past, especially when I was younger, and I kind of like yearned for that kind of like romantic connection. I was
Yeah.
like, oh no, what about Tommy? Like,
Yeah.
why are you just like letting him burn up? Like he was pretty nice.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm older, I'm like, no, I get it.
Yeah.
Like it just all has to go.
All of it has to go. Yeah. Yeah.
So Chris and Billy
Mm.
got out of there beforehand.
Yeah.
She flips their car.
Yeah.
Like,
Slay.
because they're trying to run her over.
Yeah.
And so she's just like, flip.
Yep. And then just gone.
Yeah.
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 And I think that is, you know, Chris is a complicated character, and I don't like her,
Yeah.
but I also don't think that she deserved to die.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like, you know, I think
Very
that's,
rarely, especially with movies about teenagers, will I
Girls.
say.
Yeah.
Like,
They deserve-
teenage
they
girls
deserve it.
especially.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they deserved it. Like, she was a
Yeah.
bitch.
And I
Like,
think that's
maybe she could have not been a bitch, you know?
Yeah, and I definitely think that's also sort of a, you know, like a certain creative, like, I want to say outlook, a sort of like take. I feel like the take of the movie is like, what if God is like that weird girl
Mm-hmm.
that you fucking picked on in high school?
Yeah.
Who's she's gonna spare? Probably fucking nobody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like to her, like, her world is everything. You know,
Yeah.
for a teenage girl, her world is everything. And so like the moment that's all fucked up, everyone may as well be dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like sort of like, it's literally Carrie's reckoning, where it's just sort of like, the crimes, the violence that she's inflicting is equal to what's happening in her. And I think
Yeah.
to us it's like, what the fuck? You know, like that's like fucked up. But
Yeah.
also to Carrie, it makes sense because
It's a reflection.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
her as a teenage girl. That's sort of like it's her internal sort of like world and morals and stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay, so she gets home,
Mm.
walks upstairs.
I love I'm sorry, I love the memes of like Carrie like walking home, and
Uh-huh.
it's just sort of like me coming back from the farmer's market,
Yeah.
like I love all those like memes that girls make. It's so funny.
Yeah.
But I love that sort of like quiet, just sort of like shuffling, and like she's all like stiff armed and shit, like walking into the
Yeah.
house covered in blood.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her mom.
Mhm.
So dress form,
Oh my god, yeah.
another dress form.
Yeah.
No, it's her mom.
Yeah, isn't that so scary?
And I was watching, because I didn't remember that this happened, and I was watching it for so long, and I was like, is that a dress form, or is that her mom in the background? And I watched for stuff like that, and then so much time went by that eventually I was like, oh no, it's a dress form, I guess.
Yeah.
The door closes, boom, mom. I was like, they got me.
Yeah, no, literally.
They got me
Gets you
there.
every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's also a sort of like parallel between the first scene where Carrie is sort of taking a shower and like the blood is coming down, and then also the bathtub scene where she's just washing everyone
Yeah.
else's blood off.
But
her.
and it's reverse.
Yeah, it's
Because
reversed.
first it's her blood.
Yeah.
In this moment of cleaning herself, it's
Yeah.
starting,
Yeah.
and now it's like
Ending.
everyone else's blood in this moment of cleaning herself, and it's done.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because I don't know over how many days this movie takes place, but it could have taken place over just the course of her period.
I was literally just thinking that. I was like, this is like, and I think it's also really interesting because like I also have like an interest in like the occult and stuff like that, and like a lot of times like when like poltergeist activity starts, like things like moving
Yeah.
like by themselves, a lot of times that takes place when in households where girls are just reaching puberty, like when they just start their
Yeah.
period. So there's definitely like the sentiment of like power being associated like with the menstrual cycle and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And it is interesting because I was like thinking like, man, Carrie only had her period for maybe like a couple days, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're right. It could have just been the course of her period, and
Yeah.
just like, man, like that period really gave her power. If we all had
Yeah.
that power when we're on our period, then this
Yeah.
this world would be a
Or
dark
like, wow,
place.
she had a rough week. Like, I hate it when I'm on my period.
Yeah,
And it's like murder her entire school.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah. And so she washes everything off. She
Yep.
gets out of the shower. And then she just wants to be comforted by her mom.
Like, hold me, mama. Yeah.
Yeah.
But her mom doesn't.
And her mom just wants to talk about her trauma and dump that on.
Yeah. Oh my
her.
god, the mom's monologue though, you feel so bad for her.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, this is like where this is coming from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
and you wonder like, the mom sort of feels like that she herself was sinful, but you also sort of feel like maybe she was that way because maybe she was like, I think like there's undertones of like rape that
Yes,
happened
yeah.
with the
That's
with her.
definitely what I got.
Yeah, and so I think that maybe just sort of like made her crazy.
Yeah.
And also this sort of, the mom does say like, I should have, basically killed you like when I had you, like the moment I had you. And so I think that the mom.
And she also said she should have killed herself.
Yeah.
The first time she had sex.
Yeah.
No.
I know, right? And then
Not correct.
You wonder like at what point did she become crazy, or was she crazy before? But
Yeah.
I think that also you feel the mom's pain because you're like, oh, she's living with like the manifestation of her trauma,
Yeah.
essentially walking around her house, and so that it kind of all makes sense where you're kind of like, what does she have against Carrie? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, what does she have against her daughter, who's like meek and like small and like sort of mousy? But you sort of realize like, oh, well, Carrie was born out of this traumatic event, and so like I feel like the mom sort of fears for her, but she also fears her in that way.
Yeah.
Where she can never
Because
forget about what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like a direct tie to like, this is the time I sinned.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can never forget about it because she's right there.
literally, yeah,
Yeah.
under my roof.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the mom stabs her in the back.
Yeah.
Carrie falls down the stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, she just wants to be loved, and she just wants to be held, and she felt like she probably felt like the night was a failure in that respect. Like, she was having a lovely time, and then like they played this joke on her in her mind, and
Yeah.
so her love and that any like possibility for love from someone outside of her family
Yeah.
gone. And so she turns to her mom, and her mom stabs her,
Yeah.
and then continues to try to kill her.
Yeah.
She's forced to crucify her.
Yeah, with the kitchen knives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the kitchen knives, yeah. And she is remorseful.
Mm.
And she feels bad that she
Yeah,
killed her
oh my gosh,
mom.
when she's cowering in the corner, and she does those scared eyes again, where she's,
Yeah.
like, peeking out, and she's just sort of, like, she's doing this sort of, like, scared eyes like this, and
Yeah.
it's sort of, like, she does such a good job of that.
Mhm.
But it also, I think it was interesting how so much of the audio focused on, like, the mom's, like, last exaltations.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
when she came?
It does, doesn't it sound, it sounds
Yeah.
sexual again. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
the mother's, like, religious trauma is so sexual.
Her ultimate orgasm is being crucified.
Yes, oh my gosh, yeah, it's just,
and
like,
that's what I mean when I say, like, she has replaced sex with religion in her life,
Yeah.
where it's like, how can I orgasm? Like, literally being crucified.
Yeah,
like,
no,
that would be so
literally.
cool. Like,
Yeah.
what? Okay, girl.
Literally, yeah. And then, you know, then there's that really sad scene where Carrie sort of pulls the knife out.
Yeah.
And she does it really angrily, so you feel that, like why? Like,
she's
why
frustrated
do I have
with her
to,
mom.
Yeah, like, why do I have
She's
to,
like,
destroy everything in my life that,
Yeah.
feels good, you know? It's, like, her last comfort.
Yeah.
And then the fucking house starts crumbling.
Yeah.
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 And houses crumbling in horror movies is always indicative of internal, like, familial struggles.
Yeah.
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 So,
The home.
the home is
Oh
crumbling.
no, the home.
The home's coming
Those
down.
single mothers. that is a trope in horror movies as well. Single mothers
Oh.
not being able to manage a home.
The Babadook.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. But she's distraught and she hates what she did, and then the house collapses in on itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have always wondered, was that Carrie or was that something else?
Something great. Yeah, because I was wondering the same thing. I was like,
because she hides in
why?
the closet. She takes her mom to the
does.
closet. She
Yeah.
hides in the closet. She does not seem like she wants to die in that
Yeah.
moment. And I don't know if it's just like, I'm so out of control right now. I cannot control my emotions. I cannot control anything that's going on. Like, boom, everything falls apart.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if it's like something outside
beyond
of
that.
this.
Yeah, which is, you know, again, I've mentioned it, like, multiple times throughout the episode, this sort of sense that, like, the women are just sort of, like, these channels through which this greater, like, sort of evil patriarchal power just, like, flows. And so, you know, Carrie does this horrible thing, but then, like, when she's, like, alone, it's just sort of, like, this something, whether it's in her or it's greater than her, it's just sort of, like, fucking destroys her whole world, and it just, all the way to the ground.
Yeah.
All the way to the ground.
Yeah.
So
completely crumbles.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. There's this close up on Jesus, and it, like, kind of begs the question, like, the mom was crucified.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie is kind of also this Jesus figure. She's also being crucified.
Yeah.
Like was the entire school, were they all sacrificed? Like, what is this kind of, like, even the gym teacher, now that I'm thinking about it, like, she had this, like, structure come down on her. She was standing.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
so were they all like crucified? Is this all did they all die for, like, the sins of patriarchy?
Yeah.
What's going on? What is, like, the greater meaning behind it?
Yeah.
But so then we cut to Sue, and she just has to live with it.
Yeah.
She has to live with it all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
every single person she knows, like, all of her friends, her boyfriend, her teachers.
Everything. Her sanity.
Yeah.
Is gone.
Yeah, it's all gone. And she's just kind of, like, especially the last moments of the film are super heartbreaking. Because she's just sobbing.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that in the end, you know, so Sue has this sort of dream where she is walking up to the house, or, like, the remains of the house, and there's that, you know, that cross, and or I think it was a cross, right?
Yeah.
And it says, like, you know, Carrie White burns in hell with the arrow pointing down.
Yeah.
Because she can't, you know, even rest in after death. And so then there's this scene where she's putting the flowers in the grave, and then the bloody hand reaches up out of the gravel and grabs her, which is interesting also because so that hand was actually Sissy Spacek's hand. And the director was insisting to her that they use a stunt double, but Sissy Spacek, always a stickler for consistency, was like, no, it has to be me, it has to be my hand. And so they literally buried her in the ground. And it was funny because the director was like, I'm not going to do it. And so they had her boyfriend do it. Her boyfriend buried her. And then,
Oh
you know,
my
she was asking,
God.
it was kind of like a box, I feel like, a little box situation with like maybe like a hole or something. And the whole time Carrie was just like, hey, are we ready yet? They're like, no, not quite, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but she reaches up out of the ground and she grabs her hand. And then when she wakes up, she's, you know, Sue is like screaming and like she's like
Yeah.
hysterical. And her mom holds her in a
Yeah.
way that Carrie's mother never did. Like she was
Yeah.
never there for her that way.
Yeah, and it's like the comfort of a mom. And they're also, they are directly, we skipped over this, but in the beginning, they're directly contrasted because the mom is like, you need Jesus. And then the other mom is like, okay, here's $10, get out of here.
Yeah, and also
Um,
she's like, what does she say? Like,
She's like, oh, should our
Carrie's
girls
mom-
hang out sometime?
well, and Carrie's mom is just kind of like, oh, like this is a godless world or something, and then Sue's
Yeah.
mom's like, I'll drink to that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so like, she's definitely like the fun, like modern mom compared
Yeah.
to, you know, Carrie's sort of like religious, sort of like
Yeah.
mother.
But she is also a loving mom, and you kind of
Yeah.
see snippets of Sue's family
Yeah.
at a few points.
Yeah.
But you see that, like, for all her, like, this is a godless world, and, like, all her, like, preaching and proselytizing, like, Sue's mom loves her and holds her in her
Yeah.
moments of, like,
Yeah.
need and is not directly putting
Yeah.
trauma that is not Sue's onto her.
Yeah.
She's just being there for her. And in fact, she's trying to, you know, like, distance her from the trauma.
Yeah.
She's like, no, she couldn't go
And it's
to the
that
funerals.
trauma. It's that, you know, that female trauma being passed on to them now.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And then I also think it's really interesting comparing, you know, sort of the two moms, because this was filmed in 1976, so this was like around the time of the sexual revolution, and I feel like
Yeah.
Sue's mom was definitely like more of a symbol of that, like the modern woman. You know, she's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll drink to that. You know, she's drinking
Yeah.
and she's sort of like a little bit more down to earth, and I feel like a lot of the movie has undertones of like sexual liberation.
Yeah, and she's letting her kid, like, oh, you're skipping dinner? Okay, yeah,
I know,
sure.
yeah,
like,
get out
go.
of here, yeah. And then compared to sort of like the rise of evangelicism, is that it? Evangelicalism?
Yeah,
Evangelicism?
evangelical, like,
Yeah,
culture.
in the 1950s, coming
Yeah.
out of the rise of the conservative party,
Yeah.
and then into the sort of era of sexual liberation and like things
Yeah.
like that. Definitely, those two moms definitely represent that to me the most, because
Yeah.
Carrie's mom is like the very religious, very strict, very conservative
Yeah.
one, sort of like, and she's sort of perceived as being like kind of like insane.
Yeah.
And then compared with like Sue's mom, who's like really down to earth. She's just sort of like
Yeah.
free. She's sort of like drinking. She's a modern woman.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think that was a really interesting touch. The
Yeah.
comparison between the two moms and the way that, you know, Sue's mom is much more of a mother than
Yeah.
Carrie's mom ever
She's
was.
more loving.
Yeah.
She's more affectionate. And
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
she fills the mother role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This whole movie really was about just
It was about
Moms.
moms and their girls.
moms and their girls and
Catholic
girls
moms.
and other girls and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what rough. Rough.
Apologies for all of you guys out there with Catholic moms.
Yeah.
So that it's just an experience.
I never got to have that experience, but I was just like watching the movie and I was like, damn, like Jenny's gonna like have a heyday
Yeah.
with this one. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
But
yeah, you guys be nice. Be nice to the weird girl at school, okay?
yeah. Or she'll murder you.
She'll kill you, yeah.
And then you'll
Or sometimes they make a podcast.
yeah, that's true. That's the alternative. They'll either murder you or make a podcast afterwards.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Okay.
cool.
That was
Yeah, thank
episode
you.
3.
Thank you for listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Yeah.
Yeah.